Hello, I'm Roberta Winters, President of the League of Women Voters of Radnor Township, and we're here today to talk about freaking out about this election and about the voting process that's been going on in Pennsylvania. Now, if you were not registered to vote by October 19th, you should freak out because you couldn't have voted. But don't freak out for long, because on November 4th, you can actually go to votespa.com and register. So you'll be ready for the next time it happens, which will be in the spring for our primaries. So if you didn't freak out then, you may freak out later, because you need to have a plan. You need to go and figure out what you're doing when it comes time to vote. Whether you're going to the grocery store, you just need to think ahead. You've got to have that list. You've got to know the deadlines, and you've got to know what to do. And you can find all of that out at votespa.com. If you wanted to find out about the candidates and you didn't know what you were doing when you went to the polling place and you thought, oh, I voted for the wrong guy, well, don't let it happen again. We have that website, votespa.com. And if you're seeing this before Election Day, you can still go to votespa.com. You can check out the candidates and you can compare them and find out who's going to best represent you. And if you didn't do it this time, remember it the next time. Don't freak out. Now, if you've already voted again, it's okay, because I have Jamie Mogil with me. She's an election attorney who specializes in these kinds of things. And she's also the voter service chair of the Lower Merion Narberth League of Women Voters. She's that great go-to person I have when I have a question about elections. So, Jamie, we're delighted to have you here today, and welcome back to Radnor Studio 21. Could you take a minute and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Roberta. And I love doing these shows with you. And we're a good example of leagues working together, because you're over in the Radnor League, which is our neighbor in Lower Merion, Narberth. So thank you, Roberta, for all you do. And I am an attorney. I have my own practice. I do small business support, but I also practice election law. I've been director of election protection for the state. I've worked for groups like Common Cause, and I was also on the state board for the League of Women Voters as vice president of government and social policy, working to bring in these new voting reforms, which we haven't had in Pennsylvania in 80 plus years. So couldn't have come at a better time with a major election. Nobody foresaw a pandemic, but this is exciting because voting should be accessible.
Well, I just noticed on the Inquirer today, did you see that newspaper article about throwing out all of these mail-in ballot applications? What's going on?
Well, I'll say first, we need to be careful about where we read things and the heading, because that was about rejected ballots. But if you actually read the article, it talked about how people were applying for vote by mail, which anybody can do now in Pennsylvania. That's those voting reforms that I talked about. So we went in 2016 from having maybe just like a couple dozen, thousand ballots where people applied for absentee ballots, to now having near 3 million people to apply for vote by mail and use mail-in ballots. So we're talking big changes in Pennsylvania. But why the rejections? Well, people are psyched and they're going to vote and they're going to apply for mail-in ballots, but they're doing it more than once, right? Because they're freaked out. I didn't get my ballot. Oh my goodness. I keep checking the website. Again, this freaking out. So they're applying more than once. And so they get rejected because they've already applied. So the rejection, be careful when you see that rejection. It's because people had already applied to vote by mail, and then they applied again. It's a duplicate. So they were rejected from applying again. That's the system working. So that's some 300,000, right? That we saw people were trying to apply again when they had already applied for vote by mail. But I think you're asking also, what is the reason, with vote by mail, we've been reading a lot, we've been hearing in the news, even from the president himself, about ballots being tossed out. I think we'll talk a little bit about some of those reasons and how we can prevent them from being cast aside.
Well, thanks, Jamie, because, I was one of those people who automatically applied for that ballot to come to me, but I wasn't sure I had applied. So I filled out another application and then I got a notice saying, my application was rejected and I had already applied. So, it's not just people who don't know anything about the election that's doing this kind of stuff. It's just people because you forget and you want to make sure you're covered. So I can understand why it's a big mess and we're all contributing to some of that. Now, the other thing as a lawyer, I'm sure you've figured out that the Radnor, the League of Women Voters throughout Pennsylvania and at the national level has been involved in oodles of court cases this year about the election because we want to make sure it's fair and accessible and all those things that we've fought for decades. So let's just talk a little bit about what's going on with these naked ballots. For heaven's sakes, if there's anything that gets people's attention, it's talking about naked ballots.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like your ballot needs to wear its underwear. That's the way I think about it, because you don't want to go out without your underwear. You don't want to be naked. Unfortunately, this has become a partisan battle, voting. It really should be nonpartisan. We want anybody and everybody to vote who's eligible to vote. But it has become this political battle. And Pennsylvania particularly, because we know all roads to the White House lead through Pennsylvania. And so we are really this ground zero, but it also means we have a lot of lawsuits, and they're especially over these new voting reforms. We have one party that's not so stoked about vote by mail, and we have another party that's like, yeah, we should do it. So I'm not going to say which, but I think we know. And the naked ballots came up because the Trump campaign and the RNC, the Republican National Committee, they sued Pennsylvania and all 67 counties which administer our elections. And they said, amongst other things, that ballots that do not have a secrecy envelope. So when you get a mail-in ballot, it has two envelopes. It has the one that it comes in, but inside that you use to vote, it has to have that secrecy envelope, which that's to protect the secrecy of your ballot and make sure people don't know how you voted. And then it goes inside the declaration envelope, which has the postage, and you sign it and you date it. Well, previously there wasn't clear guidance or law on the fact that you needed to have the secrecy envelope. So many counties, including Delaware County, Montgomery County, where I am, they still allowed ballots to be counted, even if people put their ballot inside that outside envelope and forgot the secrecy envelope, but no longer, because the court decided you need to have both envelopes. So no naked ballots, right? We got to make sure that people, and we're out there, the league, other good government groups, we're out there telling people, do not forget both ballots. So that is something definitively, we have a lot of lawsuits that are still up in the air, but that is one that has been decided. And yes, the league came out to support maybe the other side of it, which we didn't win on, which is that you should still count ballots even if they don't have the secrecy envelope. But we know now you got to have both envelopes.
So I really like that diagram of the person who's naked and having the ballot going in the underwear, like your privacy parts. And so that's like your ballot is private. It needs the underwear to cover it up. And then you need the pants on top of that, which is the mail-in envelope to go on top of your underwear. So that's a really great way to picture it so people don't forget. And also, once they put it in that envelope, one of the other things that's really important is that they sign that envelope. And I think there was a lot of contention about signatures on the envelopes.
Yeah.
So it may still be going on after the election. So what's with that?
Well, currently right now, as we're filming this, it is still going on. But right now, so I'll tell you the status of the case. And that is a case that the league brought not to defend a policy, but they actually went after this to go after the state to say, you should have clear guidance. You should have clear laws to say that a signature on the outside of the envelope, it's okay if it doesn't exactly match. It should still be accepted. Because right now, under our laws, it isn't really clear. Should you accept a ballot that if the T usually has a line through it, it should be accepted, or a dot over the I, or a middle initial where they don't usually use a middle initial. So the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania, along with other plaintiffs, they sued to say, we want clear guidance on this, and these signatures do not need to exactly match. as long as they verifiably look the same, and there's a lot out there, we can look to other states like Oregon or Washington that have been doing universal vote by mail. That's the only way they vote. And that we could see from them. And now the court, that case was dismissed and guidance came out from the Department of State. And now guidance isn't necessarily lost. So we see what happened because the Trump campaign and RNC, they swooped in again and they said, no, ballots that don't exactly have matching signatures, they need to be thrown out. So now we've seen, because we see a lot of this, and I won't go too much into the law about states versus federal rights, but we have state cases, which these laws are part of our state constitution, the election code. So they are really state issues, but we also see federal cases being brought and the federal court saying, no, these are state issues that we aren't supposed to decide. So we see a lot of this, we learned in law school the first year about preemption and states' rights versus federal rights. But getting back to the signature, well, now it's gotten to the point where Kathy Boockvar, our Secretary of State, has gone to our state Supreme Court and said, I need you to declare, so a declaratory judgment. She has said, I need you to rule on this, that they don't need to exactly match. And we're seeing this play out because right now, yes, we hope that people, and I always encourage them, look at your license, or if you're not sure, go to your voter services office and ask them, is this how I sign things? I mean, people are freaking out. Again, another freak out, but I say, don't get creative. Don't decide to make a new signature. Use the one you've used your whole life. And that's really what's going to matter here. But this is something that's still up in the air. This hasn't been decided. I'm waiting on the decision. I thought maybe it would come out by today, but it could be next week. It definitely will happen before the election. So if people are watching this now, stay tuned. If they're watching it after the election, I think we'll see it play out. And it's definitely going to become important because this could be a reason for challenges during the ballot canvassing process that each of the counties do.
Well, I think paying attention to that signature on your driver's license is the most important thing everybody does. So I'm glad you reminded people to do that. And I think naked ballots and signatures are important. But are there other things people need to know about that are in the courts?
Wow, there's a lot of things going on in the courts. It's pretty broad, but I would say, the drop boxes. The drop boxes are pretty big. But before I get to that, I just want to say, another thing about the ballots, the mail-in ballots, and how to fill them out properly, because this also came up, which is to make sure you fill in the bubble completely. This doesn't need to be a lawsuit. This is common sense, which is make sure you fill in the bubble. Don't put an X, don't put a check mark, keep it flat. And then this is something that I thought would come up in litigation. It hasn't really come up, but it's important that your ballot have the date because it's a declaration. You're verifying I am who I am and I filled out this ballot. So please put that date. People sometimes want to put their birth date. It's a very common mistake. Please, it's the date. Read the directions. They all come with directions. So 2 ballots, fill in the bubbles with dark ink. Don't create new creases because these ballots go through a high-speed scanner. So we don't want to create more creases. And then also put your current signature and date. So it's not rocket science, but you'd be surprised. These things matter. And they also are part of that arduous process of opening, sorting. That's that canvassing that I talked about. They're all important canvassing. So
I'm glad you went over all of that,
boxes, right?
Because, people really don't pay attention. I'm a teacher and I know people don't pay attention to directions. So it's good to remind people. And then what else is going on? Did you say, Jamie? I know you covered that well.
Well, I think you were going to ask me about the drop boxes because that's
we have one of those in Radnor. It's been sitting there, but it's not been open yet. So they're still waiting for some solar cells or something. So what's going on with these drop boxes?
That's really good that you brought that up about Radnor. And this is, again, a reminder that our counties are the ones that administer our elections. So I'm over here in Monco, which is not that far from you in Lower Merion. We have had people from other counties like City Line Avenue, they're technically Philadelphia, or over in Radnor, that's Delaware County. They're coming to Montgomery County to use the drop box at Ludington Library No, 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 no. Stick to your county. So that's another thing. People don't realize that administration or clerical errors, that's usually, people freak out. We heard about the guy who threw out the ballots by mistake and then, oh, it's fraud. No, it's not fraud. It's just an idiot, and luckily they caught it. Okay. They caught it. That's the most important thing. So please stick to your county. But drop boxes are another big item of contention. Again, that was part of Trump and the RNC suing Pennsylvania and the 67 counties because they don't feel that drop boxes are a secure method of really a placement for ballots. So they're worried about this idea that there's like ballot stuffing and you can see my expression right now because we have a hard enough time getting people to vote. I don't think people are ballot stuffing. And that's exactly what the court said. This was a federal case and it was before a Trump appointee, a federal judge appointee. And he said, look, you haven't even shown me an inkling of this voter fraud. And he dismissed the case. And so we know drop boxes are good to go. I know Monco, they're already out. Philadelphia, Radnor, you've had a little bit of an issue having them because they want to have security. And I know there's officers out here in Monco. We have the sheriff's office. In Delco, you're going to have 24-hour feed on these boxes. And that's, again, to make sure that fair is fair. It's not like a post office. I'm not pulling up at midnight and putting my mail in the mailbox. It is set specific hours. It will be monitored. And those ballots are escorted by officials like the sheriff's office to your county seat, wherever they're maintaining the chain of custody of the ballots. So really important that drop boxes were a major fail. They are major fail by litigation because they are indeed another great resource for us, an alternative, because the post office, people aren't sure about. It's been defunded. It's not as secure, unfortunately. So, hey, you can go to a drop box.
Well, I'm glad you reminded people about doing it in their own county because people in Radnor can go to Ludington, they can go to the library in Berwyn, but they're not in their own county. The other
Correct.
thing I think is important, Jamie, is the fact that, you have to do it in your own county, but you can only put your own ballot in there. Like I can't take my husband's with me. I'd get in trouble, wouldn't I?
Yes, this is also something that's part of our election code and is part, the counties do want to be careful they don't get a challenge on this. So, and I did this, I filled out my mail-in ballot and I went to Ludington Library and I was asked, is this your own ballot? So I've seen people walk up with multiple ballots and you simply cannot do that. It's part of our election code that only you can return your own ballot. Now, if there was a situation that you had a sick relative, an elderly parent that was physically incapable of dropping off their own ballot, there is a way that you can do that, right? But you have to follow the law, and that's a form. It's a declaration form, and that's available on each county's voter services website. So, Delco Votes, moncopa.org. They're available to you to fill out and declare that you need to return somebody else's ballot. So in your case, I know that your husband can return it himself, but if I had an elderly parent like my dad, I could fill it out for him. And there is a portion on the outside of the mail-in ballot where you declare that you had help filling it out. And that witness, whomever it is, it would be me for my dad, I would fill it out just so that we follow the procedure and there's no reason that the ballot would be rejected.
Well, I know all of these things, if they're not litigated now, will be litigated after the election. So it's good we talk about these, even if you voted and even if you use the drop box, to know that all of these things are happening. And the other thing is, some people I know changed their mind probably when it came time to vote and decide, well, I really don't want to use that drop box or that mail-in option. And so they took it to the polls, and that's a whole nother thing that, could create problems.
Right. So previously in the primary, we know, look, nobody foresaw a pandemic. So we had this emergency Act 12 legislation. And we had some counties like Delaware County where you could bring your mail-in ballot and drop it at a polling place. I just want to say emphatically, if you voted or you're going to vote, you cannot bring your ballot, like a mail-in ballot, to drop it like a drop box at your polling location. The polling location now is only for voting. However, look, if I said, like I tell people, you do you, we just want you to vote. So if you decide to do vote by mail, great, you have options. But if you want to go in person now, you do have the option, unlike the primary, to bring your ballot. Now you must have the full package with you. That means the ballot and the 2 envelopes. So 3 things. You have that whole packet together and you're going to present it to the poll worker. It will be spoiled, which is a bit of a process. And that's also to make sure that you can't vote twice. This is something else that came up. The president, unfortunately, encouraged what is a crime. You cannot vote twice. Please, as an election lawyer, and just, I'm giving you some unsolicited advice, okay? Please don't, but just don't do that. And luckily in Pennsylvania, you can't do that. We have ways of tracking barcodes, spoiling, that you can't vote twice. So you can have your ballot spoiled and you will be given a ballot to vote on the machines. So this is something that we didn't have before. And I know a lot of people have said to me, I'm just going to feel better about going in person. And that's great. Just make sure you vote and make sure you have a plan to vote.
Well, thanks. I'm glad you reinforced the fact that people can't vote twice in Pennsylvania.
Because, they can vote twice anywhere. It's a federal crime.
It's a federal crime. And that's all the stuff about fraud. And you talked about, there's no way we have fraud in Pennsylvania, even that was thrown out by the judges too. Now, the other thing is all of these results of the elections and canvassing and stuff. What is canvassing?
Canvassing?
Pre-canvassing.
Yeah, now it's actually under the election code, which is part of our state constitution. Pre-canvassing, it's a bit of a muddy area, or we call in the law a gray area, which is not what you want because it usually leads to litigation. And pre-canvassing was part of litigation, and that's that time period where you start to open, sort, verify those envelopes that we just talked about. And then you go into counting. So there's pre-canvassing and counting, but technically under the election code, I just want to be clear, counting is part of pre-canvassing. And that's that arduous process I just mentioned. And it takes a considerable amount of time. And I just told you how many people are applying for vote by mail in Pennsylvania. Here just in Montgomery County, over 300,000 people have voted by mail. So that's a lot of envelopes to open and sort and verify. The counting is actually the fastest part because they go through that high-speed scanner that I mentioned. So it's actually the fastest part. But this became part of litigation because under the election code, we cannot start even opening an envelope until election day morning at 7 a.m. So this is really concerning that these counties, and we know the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania, they have said, look, legislature, help us out. Give us some more time to open and do this pre-canvassing. And it's become a bit of a battle now. It's not just in the legislature, but it has become part of the courts. So there's 2 parts to this. There's the time frame of which you can postmark your ballot and it's accepted. Now that was part of litigation. I'll get to in a minute. And then there's this pre-canvassing. So the pre-canvassing right now, we're encouraging the league. We have put out an action item. If you're watching this and it's still, it hasn't happened, please call your legislator, whoever they are, and say, you need to expand this before election day morning so that the counties can start doing this canvassing. And now canvassing really should only be opening, sorting, and preparing those ballots. It should not include counting because I think it's common sense to realize if election results get out too early, that's not a good thing. So I know we're short on time, but I also want to say right now as part of litigation that the time frame for accepting ballots. And that means that the ballot, as long as it's postmarked by election day, 8 p.m., right? So make sure you take it up to the window, 11/3, November 3rd. It can be accepted by the counties up to the Friday after. Okay, now this was decided by our state Supreme Court, but the GOP leadership, they have appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, I told you this is a state issue. I hope that they don't get involved in state decisions, but we don't know. There's been a lot of decisions that have come out of the Supreme Court. So this is also muddy waters. We'll see what happens. It's a moving train. It's moving very fast.
Well, I'm really glad you filled us in on a lot of this. And I think we need to know that people shouldn't be expecting the election results the same day as election because we've got all this counting to do. and we want to make sure they're verified, and we have new machines that are actually working better and not going to be hacked. And we also have an auditing process and lots of ways that we can verify our votes because we're using paper.
Right. So we have we're short on time, but I want to say we have a paper trail that we didn't have. So in 2016, we're told that Trump won by some 40,000 votes. We had no way to check that or audit that, but now we do. All 67 counties have new machines. And I also, that point about results, we had Tom Ridge, former governor from Pennsylvania, leads this bipartisan group of election integrity experts. And he said, we should not expect results on election night, and that is okay because we want accurate results. We don't want rushed results. So we're used to this like automatic, we go on our phones and the computer or the TV. It's okay. We should wait. Again, nearly 3 million people have voted by mail in Pennsylvania.
Wow. So bottom line is be patient. Don't freak out, right?
Yes.
Don't freak out.
Go vote.
Just make sure you voted and make sure you followed the directions so your vote counted and everyone is in order. But if you do go to the polling place and you had a problem, there is an election protection number too, right, Jamie? You want to give that out?
Yes, please call 866-R-VOTE, OURVOTE. That's available right now. And you can also volunteer to help out to be a poll monitor outside. You see something, you say something, please let us know. That's at protectthevote.net.
Thank you, Jamie, because that's really important. And I'm really glad you came today because the League of Women Voters has worked very hard to make sure voting is fair, secure, and accessible. And we've learned about voter suppression from some of our student interns last month. And now you've helped us understand how this election process and its related court cases are going to be impacting all of us. Our election system is rather like a patchwork quilt, sometimes the crazy kind, I'm afraid. However, when you put all the pieces together, this is designed to really protect our democracy and all those who contribute to it. So the checks and balances are hopefully here to hold our republic together as we continue to improve the processes and systems we need to promote equity, inclusion, and diversity. I want to thank Radnor Studio 21 who have been hosting our programs and helping voters throughout this election season. And again, to Jamie and our audience to remind people to get out the vote, be patient, and don't freak out. Thanks again.